husband gave his sister a key to our house without telling me, let her call him my love, and backed her up when she reported me to CPS for neglect. When I begged him to just watch the video of her standing over our daughter's bed at 3 a.m., he accused me of spying on her. That was nearly a year ago. Yesterday, he was begging me to take him back. The first time I met my husband's family, Rebecca, his sister, pulled me aside at dinner and said, "You'll always come second, just so you know." I laughed it off, but now I see how right she was. Rebecca would call Mike during our anniversary and celebratory dinners, and he'd answer every time. She had him saved in her phone as my love, and he never saw anything weird about that. She lost her job as a pediatric nurse after she attacked a pregnant woman at the hospital. The entire family blamed it on her third failed IVF attempt and said we should feel bad for her and step up to support her. When she started coming over, I thought she was just lonely. She'd reorganize my daughter Lily's toy bins and suggest new routines for her while I worked from home doing marketing consulting. One day I came out of the bathroom and she came over and screamed at me, saying Lily was wandering around unsupervised. I'd been gone 2 minutes. She told Mike I left our daughter alone for long periods. He called me that night from his hotel and said, "Maybe you should let Rebecca help more since you seem overwhelmed." I wasn't overwhelmed. I was fine. But he'd already decided his sister knew better. The visits got worse. She'd show up during my client calls and make noise in the background. When I asked Mike to talk to her about boundaries, he said she's family. Then she started taking photos of everything. Lily's breakfast when she didn't finish her eggs, the living room when toys were scattered around. All normal toddler stuff. But she'd send them to Mike with concerned messages. Then she gifted me parenting books with passages highlighted about signs of neglect. I found one page earmarked about emotional absence in working mothers. Mike started questioning everything I did. Why did Lily have pizza for dinner? Why was she still in pull-ups at night? Why did I let her watch cartoons while I worked? When I cried from frustration, he said, "See, this emotional instability is what Rebecca's worried about." Then came the day I lost my biggest client because Rebecca created an emergency during my presentation. She claimed Lily had gotten outside alone, but I found out later she'd lured her out with cookies. Mike's response was, "Maybe this is a sign I should focus on Lily more." He said family comes first, and I should reschedule work. I found that ironic as he constantly chose Rebecca over me. Then the real nightmare started. CPS showed up at my door investigating neglect. The worker said they'd received an anonymous report about a child left alone for hours, malnourished, and living in an unsafe environment. I was in shock standing there in my clean house with my happy, well-fed daughter coloring at the table. Then Rebecca appeared within minutes. "I'm here to help however I can," she told the CPS worker. The investigation was hell. Multiple surprise visits that disrupted my remaining work. Lily started having anxiety about strangers. Rebecca volunteered to be a stable family placement if needed. When I showed Mike how suspicious the timing was, he said, "You're being paranoid about my sister. You need to stop." She started telling him I was showing signs of postpartum psychosis even though Lily was 3. He believed her. He said Rebecca's offer to watch Lily made sense while I got myself together. I begged him to see what was happening, but he'd already chosen his side. The next month was a blur of CPS visits and family meetings where everyone talked about my mental state. Rebecca had used her hospital connections to add medical credibility to her claims. I discovered this when I overheard her on the phone saying she'd called in a favor from someone in pediatric psychiatry. When I confronted her, she smiled and said, "Unfit mothers don't deserve children." I started noticing things going missing, then appearing in strange places. Spoiled milk hidden behind fresh milk in the fridge. Lily's favorite toys disappearing, then showing up dirty and broken. So I installed hidden cameras without telling anyone. What I caught made my blood run cold. The footage showed Rebecca sneaking into my house with a key I didn't know she had. She'd come in while I was sleeping and move things around methodically. She'd pour out fresh milk and replace it with expired cartons she brought in a tote bag. She'd take Lily's clean clothes from her dresser and rub them in dirt from my garden, then put them back. But that wasn't the worst part. I watched her sit on my couch and go through my laptop, her face illuminated by the screen. She was deleting client emails and changing calendar appointments. No wonder I'd been missing meetings and losing accounts. I kept watching more footage and my hands started shaking. She'd stand over Lily's bed at night just watching her sleep, sometimes for 20 minutes, just standing there in the dark like something out of a horror movie. I felt sick. I called him at work and told him to come home right away. He said he was in meetings all day with important clients. I said this was an emergency about his sister. He sighed heavily and said he'd try to leave early, but his tone suggested he thought I was being dramatic again. I spent the afternoon organizing the footage by date and time, creating a detailed timeline. I made notes about each incident, cross-referencing them with my work problems and the CPS visits. I wanted him to see the pattern clearly, to understand that this wasn't paranoia, but documented reality. Around 4, he texted that Rebecca had called him crying. She said I'd been harassing her and accusing her of crazy things. He said we needed to have a serious talk about my behavior toward his family. I told him to just come home and look at what I had. He said he'd be late because he was stopping by Rebecca's first to check on her. Of course he was. I was pacing the living room when he finally got home at 8, my laptop ready with all the evidence organized in folders. Lily was already in bed. He looked tired and annoyed, loosening his tie with jerky movements. Before I could speak, he said Rebecca was really hurt by my accusations and that I needed to apologize. I told him to sit down and watch the videos first. He rolled his eyes but sat on the couch. I pulled up the first clip on my laptop. It showed Rebecca entering at 3 a.m. with her key, clear as day. Mike watched for about 10 seconds, then said it was probably from when she house sat last year. I told him to look at the timestamp. It was from last week. He squinted at the screen and said the quality was too grainy to tell who it was, even though her face was clearly visible. I pulled up the next video where she's going through my desk drawers, pulling out papers and photographing them. He said she was probably looking for something she left here. I showed him the footage of her standing over Lily's bed in the darkness. He said she was just checking on her niece because she cares about her safety. My heart was sinking with each excuse. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. The evidence was right there on the screen, undeniable. I showed him the clip of her pouring out milk and replacing it with expired cartons. He said I probably did that myself and forgot, that I'd been forgetful lately. I showed her deleting my emails, her fingers moving deliberately across my keyboard. He said I wasn't tech savvy and probably messed up my own computer. Every single piece of evidence I showed him, he had an excuse for. His sister could do no wrong in his eyes. I was getting desperate. I pulled up the master folder with all the incidents organized chronologically. I showed him how they lined up perfectly with my work problems and the CPS visits. He stood up abruptly and said I needed help. He said my paranoia about Rebecca was getting out of control and that normal people don't install hidden cameras in their own homes to spy on family. I told him Rebecca wasn't normal family. I reminded him about her attacking that pregnant woman, how she'd had to be physically restrained. He said that was different because she was going through fertility struggles and the woman had been insensitive. I asked why she had a key to our house that I didn't know about. He said he gave it to her for emergencies months ago. I asked why he never told me. He said he didn't think it was a big deal because she's family. Everything was always like this with them. I was always the outsider who didn't understand their special bond. I was always the one overreacting to normal sibling closeness. I was always the problem, never Rebecca. I felt tears coming, but I refused to cry. That would just prove his point about me being unstable. I stood there in my living room, looking at the man I married, and realized Rebecca had been right all along. I would always come second. I needed to think clearly, so I went to the kitchen to get water. My hands were shaking as I filled the glass. Mike followed me and said we should consider having Rebecca stay with us for a while to help out. I nearly dropped the glass. I asked him if he was serious after everything I just showed him. He said the videos proved I needed support, not that Rebecca did anything wrong. That's when I noticed something. There was a folder on the counter that wasn't mine. Inside were printed emails between me and clients, but they were edited. The timestamps were changed and the content was altered to make me look unprofessional. Rebecca must have left them for Mike to find. I showed him, but he said I probably printed them myself and forgot. I was done arguing. I told him I was taking Lily to my mom's house in the morning. He said I wasn't taking his daughter anywhere and that running away would look bad to CPS. I barely slept that night. I kept checking on Lily and double checking the locks. Around 3 a.m. I heard a noise downstairs. I grabbed my phone to record and crept to the stairs. Rebecca was in my kitchen again, going through my purse. I filmed her taking my credit cards and driver's license. She looked up suddenly like she sensed me. I ducked back, but I think she saw me. I heard the back door close softly. In the morning, Mike was gone early for work. I found a note saying he'd asked Rebecca to come by to help with Lily while I got myself together. I called my lawyer friend Sarah immediately. She said to document everything and not to leave the house as it could be seen as abandonment. She also said to change the locks immediately. I called a locksmith and paid extra for emergency service. Rebecca showed up at 9 a.m. with a box of toys and books. She tried her key and looked confused when it didn't work. I watched through the people as she tried it several times. Then she started knocking. I didn't answer. She called Mike and I could hear her through the door saying I was having an episode and had locked her out. She said she was worried about Lily's safety. My phone rang. It was Mike, furious. He demanded I let Rebecca in immediately. I told him I changed the locks for security after finding out she'd been entering without permission. He said I had no right to lock his sister out of his house. I reminded him it was our house. He said if I didn't let her in, he'd come home and do it himself. I said that was fine. He could let her in when he got home. Rebecca sat on my porch for 2 hours. She kept knocking every few minutes and calling through the door that she just wanted to help. Lily asked why Aunt Rebecca was outside, and I told her we were having quiet time today. I gave her extra snacks and put on her favorite movie to keep her distracted. My neighbor Helen came over to ask if everything was okay. Rebecca told her I was having mental health issues and had locked her out. Helen looked concerned, and I saw her make a phone call as she walked away. Around noon, a police officer showed up. Rebecca had called in a wellness check, claiming I was unstable and had barricaded myself inside with a child. I spoke to the officer through the cracked door with the chain on. I explained that I was fine and had simply changed my locks. He asked to see Lily, and I brought her to the door. She waved at him and showed him her coloring book. He seemed satisfied but said family disputes were complicated. He suggested we work it out like adults. After he left, Rebecca finally gave up and drove away. I spent the afternoon backing up all my camera footage to multiple cloud services and a USB drive I hid in Lily's room. I also photographed the edited email she left and forwarded everything to Sarah. She said it was good evidence, but family court could be tricky. Judges often favored keeping families together. Mike came home early with Rebecca. He used his key and they both walked in like nothing had happened. Rebecca went straight to Lily and picked her up, saying she'd missed her so much. Lily looked uncomfortable and reached for me. Rebecca held on tighter and said mommies who lock out family members don't get hugs. Mike told me to stop being childish and apologized to his sister. I took out my phone and started recording openly. Rebecca noticed and turned her back to the camera, still holding Lily. I told her to put my daughter down. She said someone needed to show Lily proper affection since I was too cold. Mike told me to put the phone away. I kept recording and asked Rebecca why she was in my house at 3 a.m. She laughed and said I was imagining things. I asked why she took my credit cards. She looked at Mike with tears in her eyes and said I was scaring her with these accusations. Lily started crying and reaching for me harder. Rebecca finally put her down and she ran to me. I picked her up and held her close. Mike said I was poisoning Lily against his family. I said his family was poisoning itself. Rebecca whispered something to Mike and he nodded. They went to the kitchen and I heard them talking in low voices. I took Lily upstairs and locked us in her room. I called Sarah again and she said to stay put and keep recording everything. An hour later, Mike knocked and said dinner was ready. I said we weren't hungry. He said I was being ridiculous and needed to come down. I said not while Rebecca was there. He said she was staying for dinner and I needed to accept it. I heard him walk away. Later, I smelled food cooking and my stomach growled, but I wasn't going down there. I gave Lily crackers and juice boxes from my emergency stash. Around 8 p.m., Mike came back and said Rebecca went home. I cracked the door to check. The house seemed quiet, so Lily and I came out. I made her a proper dinner while she played nearby. Mike sat at the table watching me. He said Rebecca was hurt by my behavior. I said I was hurt by her breaking into my house. He said I had no proof of that. I reminded him about the videos. He said videos could be edited and that I was tech savvy enough to fake them. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. My own husband thought I was capable of creating elaborate fake videos to frame his sister. I asked him why I would do that. He said maybe I was jealous of their close relationship. Maybe I wanted to isolate him from his family. Maybe I was the one with mental problems. Each word felt like a knife twisting in my chest. That night I slept in Lily's room again. I pushed her dresser in front of the door just in case. In the morning, Mike was gone again. No note this time. I checked my laptop and found more emails had been deleted. Client inquiries I hadn't even seen yet were gone. I called my biggest remaining client to explain, and they said they'd already hired someone else after I missed our last 2 meetings. Meetings I never knew about because the emails had been deleted. I was down to just 2 small clients now. My income had dropped by 80% in just 2 months. I looked at my bank account and calculated how long I could survive without Mike's income. Not long. Maybe that was the plan all along. Make me financially dependent so I couldn't leave. I started applying for full-time jobs immediately, but knew it would take time. CPS showed up again that afternoon. A different worker this time named Jeffrey. He said they'd received another report about the child being isolated and denied access to family members. I explained about changing the locks for security. He took notes and asked to inspect the house. Everything was clean and organized. Lily was happy and healthy, but he said isolating a child from loving family members could be considered emotional abuse. I asked if breaking into someone's house was considered a crime. He said that was a matter for the police, not CPS. After he left, I called the police to file a report about Rebecca's break-ins. The officer who came said without proof of forced entry or stolen items, there wasn't much they could do. I showed him the videos, but he said she had a key, so it wasn't technically breaking in. I asked about her taking my credit cards. He said I'd have to prove she used them fraudulently. It was all perfectly legal harassment. Rebecca started showing up every day. She'd sit on my porch with gifts for Lily, telling anyone who passed by that I wouldn't let her see her niece. The neighbors started avoiding eye contact with me. Helen stopped waving. The mom from playgroup canceled our weekly meetup. I was becoming the crazy lady who locked out family. Mike started coming home later and later. When he was home, he barely spoke to me. He'd play with Lily, then go to his office and close the door. I tried to talk to him about counseling, but he said the only one who needed counseling was me. He left pamphlets for psychiatric services on the kitchen counter. I threw them away and he replaced them. One morning I woke up to find my car wouldn't start. The mechanic said someone had put sugar in the gas tank. It would cost $3,000 to fix. Mike said it was probably neighborhood kids. I knew better but had no proof. I couldn't afford to fix it with my income gone. Mike said Rebecca could drive me to appointments. I said I'd rather walk. Without a car, I couldn't take Lily to the park or grocery store easily. Rebecca told Mike I was neglecting Lily's need for outdoor activities. He started taking Lily to Rebecca's house after work, saying she had a big backyard. They'd come home late and Lily would be too tired for our bedtime stories. Our routines were falling apart. I found out Rebecca was telling Lily to call her Mama Becca. Lily slipped and said it once and I corrected her gently. Mike overheard and said I was being petty about a nickname. I said it was inappropriate. He said I was jealous that Lily loved her aunt. I said teaching a child to call another woman Mama was confusing. He said I was the one confusing her with my paranoia. The CPS visits increased to twice a week. Always different concerns. The house was too quiet. Lily seemed withdrawn. I looked tired. Each visit was another disruption. Another mark in some file about my fitness as a mother. Jeffrey started suggesting parenting classes might help. Then he said Rebecca had offered to do supervised visits to ensure Lily's well-being. I said absolutely not. He wrote that down too. I was trapped in my own home. No car, no income, no support. Mike had stopped pretending to be on my side. He'd moved to the guest room, saying my paranoia was affecting his sleep. Rebecca had a key again somehow. I'd find her in my kitchen when I came downstairs, making breakfast for Lily. Mike said he gave her the key for emergencies. I said this wasn't an emergency. He said my mental state was. I started recording everything on my phone. Every interaction, every conversation. Rebecca noticed and started being extra sweet when the camera was on. She'd coo at Lily and talk about how much she loved us both. The second I stopped recording, her face would change. Cold eyes and a smile that didn't reach them. She'd whisper things like, "You can't win this," and "She'll be mine soon." One day I came out of the shower to find Rebecca in my bedroom going through my dresser. I screamed at her to get out. She calmly said Mike asked her to get something for him. I said to leave immediately. She walked out slowly, taking her time. I found my birth control pills in the trash later. When I confronted Mike, he said I was imagining things again. I installed new locks on my bedroom door. Mike broke them off with a crowbar, saying I couldn't lock him out of his own room. I said he'd chosen the guest room. He said I'd driven him there with my behavior. Everything was my fault. My paranoia, my jealousy, my mental problems. Never Rebecca's stalking, breaking in, or manipulation. Sarah called to say she'd reviewed everything and thought I had a case for a restraining order, but she warned it could escalate things with Mike. I said things couldn't get worse. She said they always could. She was right. The next day, Mike served me with separation papers. He was seeking primary custody, citing mental instability and parental alienation. I sat on my bathroom floor crying while Lily napped. How had it come to this? 6 months ago, we were a happy family. Now I was losing everything. My husband, my home, maybe even my daughter. All because his sister decided she deserved my life, and he let her take it piece by piece. I called my mom and told her everything. She said to come home immediately. I said I couldn't leave. It would look like abandonment. She said staying was killing me slowly. I knew she was right, but I couldn't risk losing Lily. She was all that mattered now. I'd fight through anything for her. That night, I made a decision. I wouldn't let Rebecca win. I'd been playing defense too long, just reacting to her moves. It was time to go on offense. I started researching Rebecca's past. Her nursing license suspension was public record. The attack on the pregnant woman was worse than Mike had said. She'd cornered the woman in a supply closet and had to be sedated. There were other incidents too. Complaints from patients about boundary violations. I also found something interesting. Rebecca's ex-husband had filed for a restraining order 3 years ago. The details were sealed, but the case number was there. I wrote it down. Maybe he'd talk to me. Maybe I wasn't the first family she'd tried to destroy. I felt a spark of hope for the first time in weeks. The next morning, Rebecca was in my kitchen again. Instead of reacting, I smiled and said good morning. She looked surprised. I made coffee and offered her some. She narrowed her eyes but accepted accepted. I asked about her plans for the day. She said she was taking Lily to the Children's Museum. I said that sounded fun. She waited for me to object, but I didn't. Let her think she'd won. I had work to do. After they left, I called Rebecca's ex-husband, Eugene. He was hesitant at first, but when I explained my situation, he agreed to meet. We met at a coffee shop the next town over. He looked tired, older than his years. He said Rebecca had done the same thing to his sister, convinced him she was an unfit mother to their nephew, created evidence called CPS, the whole playbook. By the time he realized what was happening, his family was destroyed. He gave me copies of documents from their divorce. Rebecca had been diagnosed with something called delusional disorder. She created elaborate fantasies where she was the victim or savior. The pregnant woman she attacked had simply asked about her due date. Rebecca convinced herself the woman was taunting her. Eugene said she was dangerous when her delusions were challenged. I asked why Mike didn't know about this. He said Rebecca was very good at hiding her medical history and playing the victim. I thanked Eugene and drove home feeling validated but terrified. I was dealing with someone who literally couldn't see reality clearly. Someone who'd convinced herself I was an unfit mother and she was saving Lily. Someone my husband trusted completely. The recordings and evidence wouldn't matter if she truly believed her own lies. She'd pass any lie detector test because in her mind it was all true. When I got home, Mike was waiting with Jeffrey from CPS and another woman I didn't recognize. They said they were there for an emergency removal hearing. My heart stopped. The woman introduced herself as Dr. Patricia Chen, a child psychologist. She said there were concerns about my mental state affecting Lily's development. I asked what concerns. She said family members had reported erratic behavior, paranoia, and emotional instability. I stayed calm and asked to see the reports. Jeffrey said that wasn't possible, but I could respond to the allegations. I said I couldn't respond to allegations I couldn't see. Dr. Chen said my defensiveness was concerning. Everything I said would be twisted. If I got upset, I was unstable. If I stayed calm, I was detached. There was no winning. They interviewed Lily separately while I waited in the living room with Mike. He wouldn't look at me. I asked how he could do this to our family. He said I'd done it to myself by pushing everyone away. I said I'd only pushed away Rebecca. He said Rebecca was family, and I'd never accepted that. I said Rebecca was sick and needed help. He said I was the sick one. After an hour, they came back. Dr. Chen said Lily seemed well adjusted, but had mentioned mommy, and Aunt Rebecca didn't get along. She said conflict between caregivers could be harmful. I said Rebecca wasn't a caregiver. She said family support systems were important for child development. I felt like I was drowning in therapy speak designed to make me look bad. They left with warnings about cooperation and thinking about Lily's best interests. Mike left too, saying he needed space to think. I was alone again with Lily, who asked why everyone was upset. I told her grown-ups sometimes disagree, but we all loved her. She said Aunt Rebecca told her I might have to go away to get better. My blood ran cold. Rebecca was already preparing Lily for my removal. That night I couldn't sleep. I kept checking on Lily and reviewing my evidence files. Around 2 a.m., I heard glass breaking downstairs. I grabbed my phone and crept to the stairs. Someone was in the house. I called 911 and whispered my address. Then I locked Lily's door and waited. The police arrived quickly but found no one. A window was broken but nothing was taken. They said it was probably attempted burglary. I knew better. The next day Mike called and said he'd be staying with Rebecca for a while. He said the break-in proved I couldn't keep Lily safe. I said someone had broken in. How was that my fault? He said I'd alienated the neighbors so no one was watching out for us. Everything always came back to being my fault. I was so tired of defending myself against twisted logic. I called a security company and used my credit card to install cameras and alarms. I'd worry about paying for it later. I needed Lily safe. The installer said someone had been tampering with the old system. The wires were cut in a way that suggested knowledge of the layout. I asked him to put that in writing. More evidence that would probably be dismissed. Rebecca started a campaign on social media about helping struggling families. She posted about the importance of extended family support and how some mothers pushed away help due to pride or mental health issues. She never mentioned me by name, but our mutual acquaintances knew. The comments were supportive of her, saying she was so selfless to keep trying. I looked like the ungrateful sister-in-law rejecting help. I decided to fight back indirectly. I created my own posts about family boundaries and the importance of respecting parents' decisions. I shared articles about toxic family dynamics and emotional manipulation. Some people liked them, but Rebecca's narrative was stronger. She'd been building her image as the caring aunt for months while I looked increasingly unstable. Eugene called to check on me. He said Rebecca had escalated right before their divorce too. The delusions got stronger when challenged. He warned me to be careful. He said she'd keyed his car, poisoned his dog, and tried to burn down his sister's house, all while maintaining complete innocence. The authorities never connected it to her. She was too smart to leave direct evidence. I started preparing for the worst. I opened a bank account Mike didn't know about and deposited what little money I had left. I scanned all important documents and stored them in multiple places. I made a will stating that if anything happened to me, Lily should go to my mother, not Rebecca. I felt paranoid doing it, but Eugene's warnings echoed in my mind. The custody hearing was scheduled for next month. Mike's lawyer sent a list of witnesses, including Rebecca, Dr. Chen, and several neighbors. My lawyer said it didn't look good. The pattern of CPS visits, the psychiatric concerns, and my isolation from family support all worked against me. She said to consider a compromise, maybe supervised visits for a while to show cooperation. I said I'd think about it, but knew I'd never agree to Rebecca supervising anything. I was at the grocery store with Lily when I saw Helen. She quickly turned down another aisle to avoid me. I followed her and asked if we could talk. She looked uncomfortable but agreed. I asked what Rebecca had told her. She said Rebecca was worried about me and had asked neighbors to watch for concerning behavior. She'd said I might be dangerous to myself or others. Helen said she didn't believe it at first, but then I'd started acting strange, locking people out and being paranoid. I explained about the break-ins and showed her some of the videos on my phone. Her eyes widened as she watched Rebecca sneaking around my house. I told her about the diagnosis Eugene had shared. Helen said she had no idea. She apologized for avoiding me and said she'd tell the other neighbors. It was a small victory, but I'd take anything. That evening, Mike came by to get more clothes. I tried to talk to him about Rebecca's diagnosis, but he cut me off. He said Eugene was bitter about the divorce and would say anything. I asked him to just consider the possibility. He said the only possibility he was considering was that I needed serious help. He left with a suitcase and didn't say goodbye to Lily. I spent the night organizing everything into a clear timeline. Every incident, every piece of evidence, every witness who could support my side. I wrote out Rebecca's pattern of behavior and how it matched with delusional disorder. I printed Eugene's documents and highlighted the relevant parts. If I was going to fight for my daughter, I needed to be prepared for war. The next morning started like any other. Lily and I had breakfast, played with blocks, and read stories. Around 10 a.m., there was a knock at the door. I checked the camera and saw 2 police officers. My heart sank. I opened the door and they said they had a court order for emergency custody removal. Behind them stood Rebecca and a CPS supervisor. Rebecca's face was a mask of concern, but her eyes gleamed with triumph. I stood there frozen as the officer handed me the papers. The supervisor, a woman named Grace, said they needed to remove Lily immediately for her safety. I asked what safety concerns. She said there were allegations of severe parental alienation and emotional instability. I said I needed to call my lawyer. The officer said I could do that after they left with Lily. My hands shook as I read the emergency order. It cited multiple CPS reports, psychiatric concerns, and family testimony. Rebecca was listed as the emergency placement. Of course she was. I looked at her standing there pretending to be sad about the situation. She reached out like she wanted to comfort me, and I stepped back. The officer said I needed to get Lily ready to go. I said I wanted to pack her things. He said they'd come back for belongings later. I went upstairs where Lily was playing in her room. How do you explain to a 3-year-old that she has to go with people she barely knows? I told her she was going to stay with Aunt Rebecca for a sleepover. She asked if I was coming too. I said not today, but soon. I hugged her tight and whispered that I loved her more than anything. She said she loved me too and asked if she could bring her elephant. The officer said one toy was fine. Walking downstairs holding my daughter's hand was the hardest thing I've ever done. Rebecca stepped forward with a big smile and said everything would be okay. Lily hid behind my leg. I knelt down and told her to be brave and that I'd see her really soon. The supervisor gently took her hand and led her outside. Lily looked back at me confused and starting to cry. Rebecca followed them out without even glancing at me. I stood in my empty house in shock. My daughter was gone, just like that. No warning, no final hearing, just gone. I called Sarah immediately. She said emergency removals were rare and we needed to act fast. She'd file an appeal but warned it could take days or weeks. I asked about visitation. She said that would be determined by the court, but Rebecca as the placement would have significant input. I felt sick. I spent the rest of the day in a haze. I kept walking into Lily's room expecting to see her there. I called Mike over and over, but he didn't answer. Finally, I texted that they'd taken Lily and he needed to call me. He responded that he knew and it was for the best. I asked how he could say that. He said I brought this on myself by refusing help. I threw my phone across the room. That night I couldn't eat or sleep. I kept thinking about Lily crying for me and Rebecca telling her I was sick. I knew she'd start the brainwashing immediately. By the time I got visitation, Lily might not even want to see me. I'd seen it happen in other custody cases. The child gets confused and starts believing whatever the caregiver tells them. I had to do something but felt paralyzed. The next morning, Sarah called with bad news. The judge had denied our emergency appeal. He said there were too many concerning reports to ignore. She'd scheduled a full hearing in 2 weeks, but warned that emergency removals were rarely reversed quickly. I asked about visitation, and she said Rebecca had already filed saying I was too unstable for unsupervised visits. She was requesting supervised visits once a week for 2 hours. I wanted to scream. I decided to use the time to strengthen my case. I called Eugene again and asked if he'd testify. He said absolutely. I reached out to former colleagues who knew my work ethic. 3 agreed to write character references. I contacted Lily's pediatrician for records showing she was healthy and well cared for. Slowly, I built a counter-narrative to Rebecca's lies. Then I remembered something. Rebecca's nursing license suspension would have involved a review board. Those records might have more details about her mental state. I spent hours researching until I found a contact at the state nursing board. I explained my situation and begged for any information that could help. She said she couldn't share confidential records, but suggested I file a formal request citing child safety concerns. I filed the request immediately and paid for expedited processing. While waiting, I organized all my evidence into a comprehensive package. The videos of Rebecca breaking in, Eugene's testimony about her diagnosis, the altered emails, everything. I made multiple copies and stored them in different places. I even sent a copy to my mom in case something happened to me. 3 days later, I got my first supervised visit. It was at a family center with cameras and a social worker watching. When I saw Lily, my heart broke. She ran to me crying and clung to my neck. She said Aunt Rebecca told her I was sick and might not come back. I held her and said I wasn't sick and I'd always come back for her. The social worker wrote something down. We played with toys and I read her favorite books. She kept asking when we could go home. I said soon and changed the subject. Rebecca had dressed her in clothes I didn't recognize and styled her hair differently. Small things, but they hurt. She was already erasing me from Lily's life. When the 2 hours ended, Lily screamed as they took her away. I sat in my car sobbing for 20 minutes. The nursing board records arrived the next day. They were worse than I expected. Rebecca had been flagged for multiple boundary violations before the attack. She'd become obsessed with certain patients, showing up at their homes and claiming to be family. The review board had recommended inpatient psychiatric treatment, but she'd quit before they could enforce it. There was also a note about her refusing to acknowledge any wrongdoing, insisting she was helping people who didn't appreciate her care. I immediately sent the records to Sarah. She said they were extremely helpful, but we needed to be strategic. If we went too hard at Rebecca, she might escalate. We decided to focus on her pattern of deception rather than her mental health directly. Judges responded better to concrete lies than psychiatric speculation. We'd save the diagnosis details for cross-examination if needed. Mike finally agreed to meet me at a coffee shop. He looked tired and thinner. I asked how he could let Rebecca take our daughter. He said Rebecca wasn't taking her, she was helping during a crisis. I asked if he'd seen the nursing board records. He said I was grasping at straws to deflect from my own issues. I slid the papers across the table. He glanced at them and pushed them back. He said his sister had been through a lot and didn't need me attacking her. I asked if he even cared about Lily's well-being. He said of course he did, which is why she was with Rebecca instead of me. I asked if he'd visited her. He admitted he'd been busy with work, but Rebecca sent updates. I said our daughter was crying for her parents and he was too busy. He said I was being dramatic as usual. I realized then that I'd lost him completely. Rebecca had won that battle months ago. The next supervised visit was harder. Lily was more subdued, less eager to play. She said Aunt Rebecca told her I might be going away to a special hospital. I told her that wasn't true and asked what else Aunt Rebecca said. The social worker interrupted and said I shouldn't discuss the case with the child. I bit my tongue and focused on playing, but I could see the confusion in Lily's eyes. The poisoning had begun. Eugene flew in for the hearing. We met with Sarah to prepare his testimony. He brought photos of his nephew before and after Rebecca's involvement. The boy had gone from happy and outgoing to withdrawn and anxious. He said it took years of therapy to undo the damage. Sarah said his testimony would be powerful, but warned Rebecca's lawyer would attack his credibility as a bitter ex-husband. I also got statements from 2 of Rebecca's former coworkers. They described her as intelligent but prone to fixation. One mentioned she'd been warned about getting too involved with patients' families. Another said she'd claimed several children over the years were being neglected and needed her intervention. None resulted in actual findings of neglect. The pattern was clear to anyone willing to see it. The night before the hearing, I couldn't sleep. I kept running through everything that could go wrong. What if the judge didn't believe the evidence? What if Rebecca had manufactured more lies? What if I never got Lily back? I finally took a sleeping med at 4 a.m. just to get a few hours rest. I needed to be sharp for the most important day of my life. I dressed carefully in my most conservative outfit. Sarah said appearance mattered more than it should. I arrived early and saw Rebecca already there with Mike and their lawyer. She wore a soft pink dress and looked like everyone's favorite aunt. Mike wouldn't make eye contact. I sat on the opposite side with Sarah and Eugene. The war for my daughter was about to begin. Rebecca testified first. She spoke softly about her concerns for Lily's well-being. She said I'd become increasingly paranoid and hostile. She described finding Lily unsupervised and hungry. She talked about my refusal to accept help and my attempts to isolate Lily from loving family. She even cried delicately when describing how much she loved her niece. It was a masterful performance. Then came my turn. Sarah had coached me to stay calm and stick to facts. I described the break-ins with video evidence. I showed the altered emails and explained how my work had been sabotaged. I presented the nursing board records showing Rebecca's history of boundary violations and obsessive behavior. I kept my voice steady even when Rebecca's lawyer suggested I'd fabricated evidence out of jealousy. Eugene's testimony was devastating for their side. He described Rebecca's escalating behavior during their marriage, how she convinced him his sister was an unfit mother, how she'd manufactured evidence and called CPS repeatedly, how his nephew had suffered trauma from being removed from his mother. Rebecca's lawyer tried to paint him as vindictive, but Eugene stayed calm and factual. The parallels to my situation were undeniable. The social worker from the supervised visits testified that I'd been appropriate with Lily, but the child showed signs of distress. She said Lily had asked multiple times when she could go home. Rebecca's lawyer spun this as evidence of my emotional manipulation. My lawyer countered that any child would want to go home with their mother. The judge took notes without expression. Dr. Chen testified about her concerns regarding my mental state. Sarah cross-examined her expertly, getting her to admit she'd never actually evaluated me formally. Her opinion was based solely on Rebecca's reports. She also admitted she had no training in identifying delusional disorder or factitious disorder imposed on another. Her credibility crumbled under questioning. We presented character witnesses who described me as a loving, attentive mother. Lily's pediatrician testified she'd never seen signs of neglect or abuse. My former clients described my professionalism before the mysterious problems began. Each testimony chipped away at Rebecca's narrative. But would it be enough? Rebecca's ex-coworkers testified about her pattern of claiming children needed her intervention. One mentioned she'd kept photos of patients' children long after their care ended. Another described her becoming angry when families didn't appreciate her help. Rebecca's lawyer objected repeatedly, but the damage was done. The pattern was too clear to ignore. During a break, I overheard Rebecca telling Mike I'd paid people to lie. He was nodding along like always. I realized he'd never see the truth. His sister had him completely under her spell. Maybe she'd been manipulating him since their parents died. Maybe this was always who they were. I felt sad for the man I'd thought I married, but he was gone. The judge said he'd review everything and issue a decision within 48 hours. Those were the longest 2 days of my life. I cleaned obsessively, unable to sit still. Sarah said she felt good about our chances, but warned family court was unpredictable. I tried to prepare myself for the worst while hoping for the best. The call came on a Thursday afternoon. Sarah's voice was triumphant. The judge had ruled in my favor. He'd found Rebecca's testimony inconsistent and troubling. The pattern of behavior Eugene described combined with the nursing board records painted a clear picture. He ordered Lily returned immediately and granted me a restraining order against Rebecca. She was to have no contact with either of us. I drove to Rebecca's house with the sheriff to pick up Lily. Rebecca came to the door looking shocked. She kept saying there must be a mistake. The sheriff handed her the order and she started crying. Not the delicate tears from court, but ugly, angry sobs. She said I'd ruined everything. Mike appeared behind her looking confused. I ignored them both and called for Lily. My daughter came running with her elephant. I scooped her up and held her tight. She asked if we were going home for real this time. I said yes, forever and ever. Rebecca tried to approach, but the sheriff blocked her. She screamed that she loved Lily more than I ever could, that she deserved to be her mother. Mike had to physically hold her back as we left. I didn't look back. The drive home was surreal. Lily chattered about everything she'd done at Aunt Rebecca's house. Some of it sounded normal, but other things were concerning. She mentioned Aunt Rebecca had taken lots of photos of her for a special book. She'd had her practice calling her Mama Becca. She told her stories about how mommy sometimes went away forever, but aunts never left. I made a mental note to get Lily into therapy immediately. Back home, I deadbolted the doors and activated the security system. Lily ran to her room and started pulling out all her toys. toys. She was so happy to be home it made me cry. I ordered pizza and we had a picnic on the living room floor. She fell asleep on the couch clutching her elephant. I carried her to bed and watched her sleep for an hour, still not believing she was really here. Mike filed for divorce the next week. He claimed I'd manipulated the court and destroyed his family. I didn't fight him on it. I wanted him gone as much as he wanted to leave. We agreed to split custody of Lily once the restraining order terms were figured out. He could see her as long as Rebecca wasn't present. He agreed reluctantly, still insisting his sister was innocent. The restraining order was challenged immediately. Rebecca's new lawyer claimed it was based on hearsay and circumstantial evidence. We had to go back to court to defend it. This time I was ready. We presented security footage of her violating the order by driving past my house repeatedly. We had screenshots of fake social media accounts she'd created to monitor me. The judge extended the order for 5 years. Rebecca didn't give up easily. She started showing up at Lily's daycare claiming to be an emergency contact. She called my new clients pretending to be checking references. She sent letters to my neighbors warning them about my dangerous mental state. Each violation was documented and reported. Her behavior was escalating just like Eugene had warned. Then one night I woke up to the smell of smoke. Someone had set fire to my garbage cans. The flames were spreading toward the house. I grabbed Lily and ran outside, calling 911. The fire department arrived quickly and contained it. Security footage showed a figure in dark clothing, but the face wasn't visible. I knew it was Rebecca but couldn't prove it. Sarah filed for an emergency hearing. The judge was troubled by the escalation. He modified the restraining order to include criminal penalties for violations. The next time Rebecca came near us, she'd be arrested. He also ordered Mike to ensure his sister stayed away during his custody time. Mike protested, but the judge was firm. Our safety came first. A week later, Rebecca was arrested outside Lily's dance class. She'd been watching from her car with binoculars. The police found notebooks full of our schedules and photos of Lily in her backseat. She was charged with stalking and violating a restraining order. Mike finally seemed to realize something was wrong. He called me crying, saying he didn't know she was capable of this. The criminal trial was swift. Rebecca's lawyer tried to argue she was a concerned aunt, but the evidence was overwhelming. The notebooks contained detailed plans to rescue Lily from my neglect. She'd been building a case to petition for guardianship. She was convicted and sentenced to probation with mandatory psychiatric treatment. The judge warned any further contact would mean jail time. I thought it was over, but Rebecca's delusions were stronger than legal consequences. She sent letters from treatment saying she forgave me for keeping her from her daughter. She referred to Lily as her daughter, not niece. The facility increased her supervision, but she found ways to smuggle out messages. Each one was forwarded to the police and her probation officer. Mike finally accepted the truth about his sister. He apologized for not believing me and started therapy himself. He said their codependency went back to their parents' death. Rebecca had taken care of him, but also controlled him. He was working on setting boundaries and seeing their relationship clearly. We were civil for Lily's sake, but the trust was gone forever. 6 months later, I got a call from the psychiatric facility. Rebecca had been discharged and disappeared. They notified police, but she hadn't committed a crime yet. Just leaving treatment wasn't illegal. I immediately pulled Lily from school and stayed with my mom. Sarah got an emergency order, but Rebecca was in the wind. 2 weeks of hell followed. Then police called. Rebecca had been arrested 3 states away trying to enroll a young girl in school claiming to be her mother. The girl had been reported missing from a playground. Rebecca insisted the child was Lily, and she was protecting her from an abusive mother. DNA testing proved otherwise. She was charged with kidnapping and finally sentenced to real prison time. The nightmare was over.